Imagine being accused of, like, orchestrating this massive, sprawling federal trafficking enterprise, and your primary legal defense isn't even a simple denial.
Right, no denial at all.
Yeah. Instead, your defense team essentially looks the judge in the eye and claims you were just aggressively exercising your First Amendment rights.
It is a genuinely wild strategy.
It really is. So welcome to today's Deep Dive. It is Tuesday, May 5th, 2026, and we are untangling a legal and cultural maze that just seems to get darker and more complex by the hour.
Absolutely.
Today's mission takes us straight into the web surrounding Sean Diddy Combs. We have a massive stack of sources in front of us detailing everything from bizarre appellate court maneuvering and missing evidence to deeply disturbing insider accounts and a broader entertainment industry that might just be fundamentally built on complicity.
But before we dive into the mechanics of this, I need to set some clear parameters for you, the listener. The material we are analyzing today contains severe allegations of abuse, trafficking, and, well, highly controversial legal defense strategies.
Very controversial.
Exactly. So we are going to impartially report on what these sources say. Our role is strictly to help you understand the legal arguments and the cultural machinery described in these documents. We are not taking sides, and we are absolutely not endorsing any of the viewpoints or the actions detailed in the sources.
Right. And the information currently circulating is genuinely staggering. I mean, we are looking at a scenario where a defendant is attempting to legally reframe alleged federal crimes as constitutional art.
Which is audacious, to say the least.
Truly. And even more surprising, our sources highlight a very real, heavily debated possibility that these aggressive legal tactics could theoretically result in an early release. But, to understand how we got to this appellate court drama, we have to start at the physical beginning. Let's go back to the moment Homeland Security raided Diddy's properties.
Yeah, the timeline of the raid is where the immediate legal friction really begins. Because when federal agents execute a search warrant of that magnitude, the procedure is exhaustive.
They take everything.
They demand all digital devices. Phones, tablets, hard drives, everything gets bagged, tagged, and inventoried. But according to the legal breakdowns we're reviewing, one very specific phone mysteriously vanished from the initial inventory process.
Just gone.
Right. It was treated by the defense as if it simply did not exist, until, months later, it suddenly materialized in the legal filings.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it fundamentally changes the timeline of compliance. It is like, imagine a CEO embezzling corporate funds, right? And they hide the master ledger inside a bank vault during an SEC raid.
Okay, tracking.
And then months later, realizing the feds know about the vault, desperately trying to claim the vault itself is legally immune because a lawyer once walked past it.
That is, what's fascinating here is that is precisely the legal mechanic Diddy's team attempted to deploy when the phone finally resurfaced.
You're kidding.
No, rather than simply surrendering the device, they filed a flurry of motions to halt the process. They attempted to argue that this specific phone was entirely protected under attorney-client privilege.
But I struggle to see how they can legally blanket an entire physical device in that privilege. I mean, attorney-client privilege applies to specific communications made for the purpose of seeking legal advice, not the physical hardware itself, right?
That is the exact overreach the judge identified. You cannot immunize a personal device from a federal warrant simply because you occasionally text your lawyer from it.
Right.
Judge Yane, who presided over this specific dispute, dismantled the argument completely. He didn't just deny the motion, he explicitly labeled the defense's maneuver as a strategic delay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and in the meticulously polite world of federal court rulings, a judge calling your motion a strategic delay is a massive red flag. It implies deliberate intent to subvert the judicial process rather than just, a genuine misunderstanding of constitutional rights.
Which raises the obvious question. Why risk angering a federal judge to stall for time? What was allegedly on that specific phone?
Well, the sources allege this device held the blueprint for Diddy's attempts to actively manage the fallout from behind the scenes. We are talking about allegations of orchestrated social media campaigns designed, in his own alleged words, to taint the jury pool.
That is serious.
Very. Furthermore, the sources detail efforts to publicly leak specific materials he believed would cast doubt on the prosecution, and the use of third-party intermediaries to contact potential witnesses.
Wait, so this elevates the situation from the underlying trafficking charges into the realm of witness tampering and obstruction of justice.
Exactly.
But that introduces a massive contradiction in the federal timeline. If prosecutors had a phone containing clear evidence of witness tampering, why wasn't obstruction of justice listed on the final slate of charges? If a suspect hides a phone and tries to fake a legal privilege over it, that is practically a textbook obstruction charge.
It seems like a glaring omission, I know. But if you look at how federal RICO and complex enterprise cases are structured, it actually makes tactical sense.
Really? How so?
Well, in high-stakes federal prosecutions, the government often leaves a seemingly obvious minor charge like obstruction off the initial indictment intentionally. It acts as a procedural trapdoor.
A trapdoor.
Okay, right. If the defense decides to take the stand, or if they try to introduce questionable evidence during the trial, prosecutors can immediately drop a superseding indictment featuring that obstruction charge. It allows them to blow up the defense's credibility in real time without showing all their cards up front.
Oh, that is smart.
Yeah.
That completely recontextualizes the missing phone. It isn't just a missing piece of evidence, it's a potential landmine waiting for the trial.
Exactly.
But while that covers the frantic behind-the-scenes maneuvering, the actual legal defense, currently playing out in the appeals court, takes a totally different, jarringly aggressive approach. They are directly targeting the Mann Act conviction.
And for you listening, historical context is vital here. The Mann Act is a federal statute originally passed in 1910. It strictly prohibits transporting individuals across state lines for any commercial exploitative purpose. It is the foundational tool federal prosecutors use to dismantle trafficking rings. Diddy's defense team is attacking the application of this act using a two-pronged strategy that is, frankly, audacious.
Yeah, the first prong is purely economic. The defense is trying to argue that these events lacked the required commercial purpose mandated by the Mann Act. They point out that Diddy allegedly lost money organizing these massive gatherings, that he paid the individuals out of his own pocket, and, most crucially for their argument, that the video recordings of these encounters were never distributed, sold, or broadcast to the public.
Right. They are essentially trying to sever the financial exchange from the legal definition of commerce. By claiming it was a personal financial loss rather than a profit-generating enterprise, they hope to invalidate the Mann Act's core requirement.
Wow.
But the second prong of their defense is where the legal theory gets truly surreal. They are leaning heavily on the Constitution, specifically claiming that these events referred to in the documents as freak-offs are protected by the First Amendment.
Wait, so they are essentially comparing alleged federal crimes to running a private amateur OnlyFans?
Yes. They are attempting to define them as highly choreographed performances.
Unbelievable.
The defense highlights the use of specific costumes, professional stage lighting, and elaborate role play, trying to package the whole thing as an amateur artistic production.
They are building a legal Trojan horse.
Exactly.
They are trying to hollow out a severe federal trafficking allegation and hide it inside the protected, constitutionally sacred shell of free speech, hoping the appellate judges just wave it through the gates.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see why the appeals court is actually forced to hear these arguments rather than just tossing them out immediately.
Because of the First Amendment implication.
Right. The legal definition of artistic expression is a terrifyingly gray area in American jurisprudence. The court has to evaluate a very uncomfortable question. If a camera is present and the participants are wearing costumes under staged lighting, at what exact legal threshold does an illicit act miraculously transform into a protected artistic production?
Wow.
The defense is weaponizing that ambiguity. They aren't denying that the transportation occurred or that the filming happened. They are aggressively attacking the legal categorization of those acts, trying to swap the label of exploitation for freedom of expression.
The prosecutors are understandably calling this defense completely meritless. But the fact that appellate judges are actively entertaining this argument right now means it is a viable threat to the government's case.
Right.
If this legal Trojan horse actually works, our sources suggest the conviction could be unraveled, theoretically leading to his release around 2028 or possibly sooner.
However, that audacious legal defense, framing this entirely as a mutually agreed upon, constitutionally protected artistic production, it completely shatters when you look at the actual psychological reality of the people working within that enterprise.
Definitely.
Because artistic productions do not generally require the crew to maintain hidden survival gear just to get through the workday.
Exactly. Which brings us to the harrowing reality detailed in the exclusive interview between national correspondent Jerrica Duncan and Deontay Nash, who was a stylist and former employee who filed a lawsuit alleging years of physical abuse.
The granular details Nash provided pull you completely out of the abstract legal theories of the appellate court and drop you squarely into the cortisol-drenched environment of that inner circle.
Yeah. I want you to visualize your own workplace for a moment. Imagine the atmosphere being so perpetually volatile, so physically threatening that you feel compelled to keep a to-go bag permanently packed and hidden.
Just waiting there.
Yeah. Nash detailed the exact inventory of his bag: underwear, shorts, a tank top, a heavy hoodie, a pair of Vans, and a stash of hard cash. Just sitting there every single day, so he could instantly flee and vanish if his boss's mood shifted. And when asked about this, Nash described it as very normal behavior.
That is the textbook normalization of extreme paranoia.
Yeah.
When physical self-preservation and emergency evasion become standard operating procedure for a stylist, it speaks volumes about the systemic power dynamics. Nash delivered a chilling quote regarding the absolute lack of intervention from anyone in that orbit. He asked, "Who are we going to call Ghostbusters?"
It perfectly encapsulates the isolation. There was no HR department, there was no higher authority to report to. Everyone in the ecosystem simply pacified the behavior to survive it.
Right.
And according to other former associates cited in the sources, the baseline volatility of that environment escalated dramatically over the years, largely due to a shift in chemical dependencies.
Yeah, one associate specifically noted that in the earlier years of his career, Diddy avoided hard drugs and even hard liquor, sticking strictly to high-end champagne like Dom Perignon and Cristal.
Okay.
But the sources claim a later addiction to pain pills fundamentally altered his behavioral baseline. When you introduce synthetic opioids into an environment already fueled by immense wealth and zero boundaries, the volatility becomes incredibly dangerous.
And that volatility was allegedly enforced by lethal intimidation. The sources highlight that during the raids, federal agents found multiple firearms. But these weren't standard registered security weapons. The associate claims Diddy would utilize street connections to buy 5 to 8 weapons at a time.
And critically, these weapons allegedly had altered or obliterated serial numbers.
Yeah, the mechanics of that are vital to understand. By purchasing firearms in bulk through street connections, you entirely bypass federal background checks and creation records. Altering the serial numbers turns them into untraceable ghost assets.
Yep.
It is a massive federal crime in itself, but more importantly, it demonstrates a deliberate intent to possess lethal force outside the bounds of the law.
So you have an environment managed by a boss, allegedly fueled by pain pills, armed with untraceable weapons, while employees operate with packed escape bags under their desks.
Right.
How does an enterprise like that maintain a polished corporate public image? You leverage the ultimate moral shield, which is religion. A source's detail claims that Diddy specifically associated himself with prominent religious figures, like Pastor T.D. Jakes, to systematically sanitize his public persona. One source cynically summarized the strategy by saying, "Ain't no money like church money."
Wow. It represents the architecture of a perfectly constructed dual life.
Yeah.
You have a chaotic, deeply paranoid private reality, heavily insulated from consequences, completely masked by highly publicized associations with spiritual leaders.
Yes.
It projects a narrative of redemption, faith, and morality to the public, while the reality on the ground is pure survival.
But just as you start to form a clear mental map of this dynamic, the powerful, insulated abuser at the top and the terrified, trapped employees at the bottom, the narrative gets incredibly murky.
It really does.
The clean lines of the prosecution's case get tangled up with the introduction of a man named Clayton Howard.
Yeah, Clayton Howard. He represents a massive hurdle for the justice system.
He really does.
Because publicly, Clayton Howard identifies himself as a victim of this entire saga. He has stated on the record that Diddy should face severe punishment for the documented domestic abuse against Cassie.
Okay, makes sense.
So far, that aligns perfectly with what the prosecutors are trying to establish. But then the sources reveal that Clayton wrote a formal letter directly to the judge. And in this letter, as a self-proclaimed victim, he formally requested a significantly lighter sentence for Diddy.
Wait, lighter?
Yes, suggesting less than 5 years, or even just the 15 months he actually received.
To understand why a supposed victim would advocate for their alleged abuser, you have to look at how Clayton categorizes the broader enterprise. Clayton fundamentally rejects the prosecution's core argument regarding the Mann Act.
How so?
The government claims the male entertainers flown in for these parties were victims of an exploitative trafficking ring. Clayton insists that he and the other men involved were entirely willing, active, and compensated participants.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Clayton completely flips the entire narrative structure. He claims he was never a victim of Diddy's enterprise. Instead, he claims he was actually a victim of Cassie and Jane Doe.
Wow.
Yeah, he alleges that Cassie actively coerced him, infected him with an STD, and maintained a prolonged relationship with him that ultimately resulted in a terminated pregnancy.
That is a massive accusation.
He's effectively telling the court that the prosecution fabricated a convenient narrative about Diddy exploiting men to secure a RICO conviction while completely ignoring Clayton's claims of being victimized by the women the government is protecting.
From a procedural standpoint, this threatens to break the prosecution's entire strategy.
Definitely.
When federal prosecutors build a sprawling RA or trafficking case, they need to construct a clean, cohesive pyramid for the jury. They need clearly defined perpetrators at the top and clearly defined victims at the bottom.
Right.
Clayton Howard is essentially pulling a massive load-bearing block out of the middle of that pyramid. If one of your key individuals takes the stand, defends the primary accused, demands a lighter sentence, and points the finger of abuse at your other star witnesses.
The jury gets confused.
Exactly. It introduces an overwhelming amount of reasonable doubt regarding the structure of the entire enterprise. Clayton claims he provided all of his travel records and testimony to the investigators early on, but feels he was deliberately silenced because his version of reality didn't fit the neat, digestible narrative the system needed to present to a jury.
And the public reaction to Clayton's claims has been utterly fierce. The internet commentary highlighted in our sources zeroes in on a massive logical contradiction. People are asking, how can Clayton legitimately call himself a victim of coercion by Cassie when he was a completely willing participant in the broader financial ecosystem?
He took some money.
He openly admits he chose to accept the flights. He admits he accepted the cash from Diddy. The public consensus seems to be, well, you were a willing participant in the transactional nature of this environment. You cannot accept the luxury flights and the payouts and then suddenly claim victimhood when the interpersonal dynamics get toxic.
This raises an important question about the nature of the environment itself. How does an ecosystem become so deeply distorted that the definitions of victim, willing participant, and abuser become entirely indistinguishable?
It's just a mess.
It is. This level of psychological manipulation, the constant fear that necessitates to-go bags, the deeply blurred moral lines of individuals like Clayton Howard, none of this can exist in a vacuum. One man, no matter how wealthy, cannot sustain that distorted reality alone. It requires an entire industry to actively look the other way, or worse, to directly participate in and benefit from the machinery.
Which brings us to the complicity machine itself. Our sources include the perspective of Jaguar Wright, who has been incredibly vocal about the systemic nature of this issue. Her analysis is chilling.
Yeah.
She argues that figures like Diddy and Jay-Z did not simply stumble into their immense industry power through talent alone.
Yeah.
She alleges they were deliberately selected to serve as industry gatekeepers by individuals even higher up the corporate ladder.
And she makes a vital point about how we perceive industry-wide corruption. She compares the situation directly to the Harvey Weinstein flyout in Hollywood.
Oh, that makes sense.
Understanding this level of complicity isn't about finding one specific smoking gun event. It is a slow, agonizing realization. You watch the patterns of behavior repeat over decades. You watch specific individuals aggressively grow their influence, and you watch the broader industry actively reward those who efficiently keep the secrets and protect the elite.
And conversely, you watch the industry completely annihilate the people who try to blow the whistle. They get blacklisted, their reputations are destroyed in the press, and they are financially ruined.
Exactly.
Jaguar Wright openly admitted she strategically waited until her children were grown adults before she fully spoke out, because she fully understood the immense retaliatory power of the machinery she was challenging.
That is terrifying.
It is. And according to our sources, that machinery was fundamentally built around the concept of elite convenience. We have fascinating quotes from an insider known as Big Homie Cece, who focused on the sheer ease of Diddy's notorious parties.
Yeah, Big Homie CC provides a crucial psychological insight into how the entertainment industry operates at the highest levels. These parties were not just wild gatherings, they were highly engineered, hyper-controlled environments. Everything was curated.
Right.
For a visiting celebrity, there was zero effort required to obtain anything they desired. And more importantly, there was zero threat of rejection. It was a space meticulously designed to cater unconditionally to the egos and the darkest impulses of the famous.
Which is exactly why Cece pointed out that certain celebrities, like Bow Wow, are allegedly out there publicly lamenting the current drought of these parties.
Wow.
Yeah, they aren't just missing a fun weekend. They are mourning the loss of a highly specialized environment where they faced absolutely no societal boundaries or consequences. And when you exist in a consequence-free environment for long enough, the roles people play begin to mutate. Look at the intense speculation in the sources surrounding Usher's career trajectory.
Usher's early development as an artist is inextricably linked to Diddy's environment. But the commentary we are analyzing questions the evolution of his role. Did he enter that world as a young, vulnerable victim of a predatory ecosystem, only to slowly transition over the years into a procurer or a cooperating agent who helps sustain that very same environment for others?
The sources certainly lean heavily into that darker speculation. They point to Usher's highly publicized, seemingly perfect relationship with TLC's Chili, alleging it was nothing more than a calculated PR stunt designed to provide mainstream cover and normalize his image to the public.
And it goes deeper.
It does. The sources even scrutinize his current marriage to a former stylist, claiming she built her initial industry reputation by stealing wardrobe items for video shoots, suggesting she was fully embedded and comfortable in that chaotic, boundaryless lifestyle from the beginning.
And for those who aren't bound by loyalty, the ecosystem maintains its grip through the weaponization of leverage. The rumors highlighted in the sources surrounding artists like Meek Mill suggest that his continued vocal loyalty to Diddy is not born out of genuine friendship, but out of sheer self-preservation.
Right.
The underlying speculation is that Diddy systematically gathered incriminating material on him and potentially dozens of other high-profile figures.
It is a culture built entirely on mutually assured destruction. Big Homie Cece summed up the psychological toll perfectly. He noted that after just 1 year of being fully immersed in that celebrity circuit, absolutely nothing shocked him anymore.
Wow.
His ultimate realization was simply, oh, so they all like this. The entire ecosystem wasn't just constructed to protect one mogul, it was a bespoke service industry built to facilitate the desires of the elite.
which perfectly explains why the silence was so deafening for so many decades. The machine was simply working too well for too many important people to ever let it be dismantled from the inside.
So what does this all mean? We started today's deep dive looking at a mysteriously vanished phone and a legal team's desperate attempt to stretch attorney-client privilege over a physical device to avoid obstruction charges. We explored the sheer audacity of a legal Trojan horse, using the First Amendment to try and rebrand federal trafficking allegations as highly choreographed constitutional art. We looked at the terrifying psychological toll of the employees forced to keep hidden survival bags packed just to safely navigate their workday amidst untraceable firearms and chemical volatility.
Right.
We examined how the prosecution's clean narrative is being actively fractured by contradictory victims like Clayton Howard. And we pulled back the lens to look at a sprawling entertainment industry that, even right now, might simply be mourning the loss of its most convenient, consequence-free playground.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. This is not just a localized story about the rise and fall of one music executive. It is a masterclass in the architecture of power, the weaponization of leverage, and the profound, impenetrable silence that an entire industry will maintain to protect its own convenience.
And that reality leaves us with a final, deeply unsettling thought to consider. If we follow Jaguar Wright's premise to its logical conclusion, that individuals like Diddy were deliberately selected to serve as gatekeepers, specifically to manage and facilitate this boundaryless environment for the elite, well, Diddy is currently removed from the board.
Yeah, he is.
The parties are experiencing a drought, but the underlying machinery of that industry and the immense elite demand for that specific type of consequence-free access has not disappeared. The infrastructure is still entirely intact. So the question we have to ask ourselves going forward is this: who is the next gatekeeper currently being selected by the powers that be to quietly fill that void?
A chilling thought to leave you with, and a reminder that the story is far from over. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your eyes open, keep analyzing the mechanics of the information you consume, and always keep questioning the narratives you are handed. We'll catch you next time.